This episode of the Catapult 5 in 5 series explores the topic of load, which is a term that's used pretty universally in performance sport by practitioners across a whole range of different professions. Quite often, even though people are actually using the same term, so they're referring to load, they mean different things, either subtly or significantly different things. Now, part of this stems from the fact that load as a word very often doesn't exist in isolation, and we use it in conjunction with a whole host of other words or terms to give meaning to some of the work that we do. So we may hear people referring to things like load monitoring, load management. We may hear people referring to acute load and chronic load. And then in the relation to the training and match exposure that we see in players, we could be referring to individual load, whether somebody's been overloaded or underloaded. So there's a real scope here for us to either misunderstand or to be having a conversation with somebody where we're using the same terminology, but possibly meaning slightly different things. So what I want to do is just present a very simplistic model whereby load can be simply categorized and hopefully creates a basis for collective understanding. So using this particular model here, I'm going to divide load into two components. The first one on the left-hand side here is that which we might talk about as external load. An external load, put simply, describes any stress which we impose on players through a prescribed quantity of work. So that could be in training, outside on the field, it could include training in the gymnasium, or it could be in a match scenario. But whatever happens, that external load we can think of as being something of a stimulus. And it's a stimulus for the other side of the equation, which is what we'd call the internal load. And the internal load describes any kind of physical or physiological response of an athlete to the exposed external load or the external stimulus. So there's two sides to this loading equation, external and internal. One of them is the stimulus for the other, so they don't actually occur absolutely simultaneously. And there'll always be a little bit of a time lag for the internal response following the external stimulus. Now, winding the clock back about 20 years, when I went into applied sport, we had a situation where we didn't actually have the technology to monitor on a regular and a simple basis the external load of our players. So the first thing I did when I went into the soccer club in 1997 was I created what I knew from my time in the university sector. And I built a lab. And I built a lab with the capability of collecting some very sophisticated information on internal responses to load. But the load that we're applying in a laboratory is, as you can see here in the center of the lab, would be an external load that would be treadmill and very much removed from the demands of the sport that we were interested in, which is that of football. And we'd collect all sorts of information on the players, such as some fundamental or basic anthropometry or body composition information. We'd collect more sophisticated body composition measurements. So this here is something called a bod pod, which is a very expensive mechanism, which gives you feedback on levels of body fat percentage, for example. And then we collected a lot of bloods from the players, and we would look at things like reactions and responses to match day over the subsequent 24, 48 and 72 hours. But all of this information here was very much in relation to the internal side of the load equation. And in fact, the only thing that we had to measure what went on in the field were heart rate monitors. And they did give us feedback on the internal side of the load equation. But at that point in time, we had very little information on the external load side. And then in 2002, things changed a bit because we took charge of a number of these GP Sports SPI GPS devices, 1 Hertz GPS devices, And what this actually provided us with was the first opportunity to begin to collect some external load information on the players. So we created a situation in 2002 where for the first time we could begin to look at both sides of this equation pretty much simultaneously. So we'd collect external load using these GP Sports units, and we could also get internal responses on the field because they integrated with heart rate monitors, and obviously we could complement that also with the internal load measures that we were getting within the laboratory. So if anybody has any questions on that particular 5-in-5 series presentation, my email address is here, or there will be information on the Catapult Sports website. Thank you very much.